Without the sun, there would be darkness and nothing would grow. The earth would be without life. This the sun-worshipping Indians of the plains knew. This our scientists know. Through the chemistry of sunlight, green plants store energy. Animals, by eating plants, obtain their energy, and the entire chain of life continues in this way. Grass, insect, lizard, snake, hawk. Together they form a food chain, one dependent on the other, and all dependent on the sun. Not all of the energy flowing through this chain is used. Part of it is lost as heat when food is converted into energy, and the rest returns to the earth as nutrients for plants. But the plants need the sun to start the chain again, so there must always be a power source, the sun, to renew the flow of energy for man as well as hawk. Now man is demanding an amount of energy that even the Earth's vast storehouse of fossil fuels cannot supply indefinitely. If we break the cycle of the energy chain, we are in trouble. Cars and industries run on it. Electricity is made from it. Our modern civilization is built on gas, oil, and coal, all byproducts of the sun. When you open a coal field, you are tapping the energy of the sun, stored in plants millions of years ago and fossilized within the earth. Here, underlying Black Mesa, Arizona, are hundreds of millions of tons of coal. Coal of such low quality that it wouldn't have been touched unless there was a great new market for fuel in the region. Fuel for new power plants to supply the growing energy needs of Los Angeles, Tucson, Albuquerque, Phoenix, and Las Vegas. Just a few years ago, this coal couldn't have been economically mined. But the development of new machinery, mammoth drag lines with longer cranes and bigger buckets to strip away the earth to greater depth than ever, have opened hundreds of square miles of surface coal deposits to strip mining. Land that will be changed by our growing desire for more and more energy. The drag lines now in use by the Peabody Coal Company go down about 80 feet to reach coal. There will be bigger ones in the future with the deeper seams. You can mine any coal, the operators say, as long as it's economical. At Black Mesa, Peabody says it will be stripping at least 14,000 of the 64,000 acres it has leased from the Navajo and Hopi tribes. What happens here could be a pattern for the whole West, because the coal rush is on. During the 2 years that Peabody has been operating here, a total of 2 million acres has been leased by coal, gas, and oil companies on public and Indian lands for strip mining. Leased with the full cooperation of the Department of the Interior, which administers or holds these lands in trust for the Indians. Strippable coal has been found in 14 western states. We could wind up with a series of Appalachias spreading from Pennsylvania to the shores of the Pacific, and no more coal. And we're becoming more efficient at getting that coal out all the time. Red Walker of Peabody's Black Mesa mine describes what happens to coal after it's loaded into their 100-ton trucks.
From there, it goes on the conveyor system and up into the rotary breakers, broke down to 2 inches and under. From there, over electronic scales, coal's weighed out onto a radio stacker belt, which can be positioned in either live storage or dead storage, which Black Mesa pipeline picks it up from there. When it goes into the pipeline, it's pumped at a variable rate between 600 and 650 ton per hour. And these 600 or 650 or 700 ton of water also mixed with this coal, this slurry. From the time that slurry is put in the line here at the mine site at Black Mesa, it's approximately 3 days before it reaches the power plant at Mojave.
The low-grade coal is burned, and there's air pollution over the Mojave Desert.
My name is Dick Hayslip. I am an engineer with the Environmental Planning Department of the Southern California Edison Company. This is the Mojave Power Plant in southern Nevada. The plant utilizes coal from the Black Mesa mine in northern Arizona. The coal is delivered to the plant via a coal slurry pipeline about 275 miles in length. What happens here at the plant is basically a rather simple process. The coal is used in a combustion process to generate steam from water. The steam is then used to drive a turbine, which is coupled to a generator, which generates electricity.
One of the things that makes this plant different is the way huge quantities of water are being used to transport coal from mine to generating plant. The slurry line, the longest ever built, drains the main groundwater supply of northeastern Arizona at the rate of about 2.5 million gallons a day. In addition to the slurry water, enough cooling water to supply a city of 150,000 people every year must be piped from the nearby Colorado River, a river already overcommitted for irrigation and other uses. Recycling conserves water at the plant for use again, but eventually the water evaporates and the brine is collected in settling ponds. Not a drop of the polluted water can be returned to the river. The Mojave is more efficient than older plants, converting 40% of the coal's original energy to electricity. The rest is lost as heat going up the stacks and into the cooling water. After other losses, including losses in transmission, about 33% reaches consumers in Los Angeles, Phoenix, and Las Vegas at the end of this man-made energy chain. Energy growth. It's out of sight. The United States, with only 6% of the world's population, consumes about 33% of the world's energy. And our electric power requirements are growing at the rate of 8 to 9% a year on the average, doubling every 10 years since 1950. And for what? Well, one example of how this power is being used is Las Vegas, with its sidewalk air conditioning and its spectacular neon lights. Las Vegas eats up 5 times more kilowatts per person than the national average. Burning coal is one way to meet this demand for power. The question is, can we afford to dig up the West just to satisfy our energy habit?
This is the biggest bargain you've got going for you. It waits on you hand and foot, but it doesn't cost you an arm and a leg. It comes on at the flick of a finger, does its job cleanly, efficiently, dependably, and at a price that lags far behind the rising cost of living. The people at your investor-owned electric light and power companies make it their business to keep it that way. Every year, you're finding more and more ways to put electricity to work, more and more ways to make it serve you. And we're doing all we can to keep your electric service the biggest bargain you've got going for you.
There are a great many people in this nation that seem to feel that they want to return to the good old days, the zero growth advocates and the zero energy growth advocates, the zero pollution advocates. I personally feel that these people are well-meaning, but they're missing the point. I don't think we're going to turn this nation around as a nation of economic growth.
There's an old saying that nothing is defended more than what is about to change. And I suspect this is why so many industry people are rising up and accusing the environmentalists of being against progress, against the well-being of the nation, for example. And actually, I think this is nonsense. There's plenty of room in our system if we'll organize ourselves a bit better, clean it up in short, to improve the quality of life for everybody. And the first big step in resolving what we now call the power crisis is to eliminate waste in our system. For example, the big users of electricity, many of the industries, get large discounts for the larger quantities of power that they use. And I think that if we're really getting short, it's time that we eliminated these discounts. And then everybody will be on the same footing, and the competition that this will enforce ought to be good for everybody if we really believe in the free enterprise system.
I don't think that people are going to say we don't want any more air conditioning, or that we don't want any more machines to provide efficiencies and comforts in the home and in industry. Some of these people have said that we ought to stop promoting electricity, and that the power companies are spending millions of dollars on advertising. I think in the past, power companies have advertised and promoted. Today, this isn't true. Our company, the Southern California Edison Company, does not spend a penny on promotional advertising. Any growth that results in this area is growth that comes out of the consuming public's demands and wishes.
You know, one of the confusing and very difficult questions at the present time from the public point of view is the notion that the demands for more and more power are real public demands. In other words, the notion that the public is really demanding this. And I deny this, because actually industry has been promoting the use of electricity at an intemperate rate.
Pacific Gas and Electric is one of the companies that's still promoting.
His game may never finish. Despite over-enthusiastic people like Herbert, outdoor lighting is great for golfers, skiers, swimmers, tennis players, everyone.
Well, almost everyone. Where the coal is mined on Black Mesa, the Navajos don't have any electricity. Furthermore, a significant number of them don't want it. The traditionals feel their way of life will be destroyed. Other members of the tribe see jobs and coal royalties, about $3 million a year to the Navajos and nearby Hopi Indians, over the 35-year lease. The traditionals are a minority within a minority, a rural people who had little contact with the outside world until Peabody came along. The coal company promised jobs, and like the rural people of Appalachia, Ohio, and Illinois, the Indians signed away their birthright without understanding the consequences to their land.
Why did they come here to destroy our homeland, our ancestral way of living? This is the way we lived, and we want to live this way. We have our choices. This is our freedom. We came here, we worship Mother Earth on its altar. We love her. We pray to the sun who gave us light. We lived without electricity. We lived without all the modern so-called conveniences like television, telephones, can openers, electric toothbrushes. We lived in harmony with our gods, with our deities.
The contract was signed in 1964, long before Peter MacDonald became tribal chairman. He questions its terms.
The power development on the Navajo reservation or near Navajo reservation certainly gives the Navajo people some concern, gives us, the leaders of the Navajo tribe, some concern, in that it not only creates a pollution that everyone is talking about, but on the other hand, there are other matters that we, the Navajo people, want to consider. Is it wise for the tribe to continue to let outsiders use its resources in return for a small sum received for royalties and also a handful of jobs? If we are to continue just to let our resources be utilized in this manner, I'm afraid that 30 and 50 years from now, we'll be in worse shape than we are today. We have groups that are very strong against the pollution of the land and development of the power plants in the area. And there are those who are strong for employment of the Navajos for any kind of development.
About 10 years ago or more, there was an agreement which okayed the mining. This agreement also guaranteed employment at the mine. Peabody said there would be work for me as soon as they began mining. So 2 years ago, the mining started and I began to work. There were no jobs for us who live on Black Mesa before, not even off-reservation jobs. When Peabody came, there was work for us here. Some of us are very thankful for it. The sheep which supported us before cannot support us anymore. The land is the same size, but there are more people living on it now. There is no longer enough grass for the sheep and other animals. It's too crowded, so work is much better.
Lee Bradley, the Navajo interpreter for Peabody, explains the overgrazing problem on Black Mesa.
I think that our people has overgrazed this country where there's no feed at all. And if they can cut down on their livestock, we might be able to bring this country back. But as far as the Peabodys moved in, I don't think that the Peabody will hurt this area any at all. To my own personal opinion, when the company reclaims the ground, I think it'll be in better shape than what it is now when they first took over.
Opposition to the mine is centered among the traditionals, made up of some of the young but more of the old who believe that the earth is sacred.
It's just a hearsay, so just like what the traditionals from the Hopi says that this is their Mother Earth, and the Navajo claim that this is their mother, yes. But by digging it up and you say it's destroying it, nothing will ever grow back, and they just adopted that as an agitation, and that's the reason.
Lee Bradley, you said this earth, Black Mesa, is not holy. Why shouldn't it be holy? I think it is holy. The earth is my mother. I speak of her only with reverence. That's how my prayer is. That's why it's meaningful. The earth is meaningful to me. I return all my ceremonial things back to earth. Now you are digging where I used to carry my medicine bundle. My medicine bundle depends on the well-being of the earth. And my children, my sheep, my horses, cattle, and donkeys, and everything depend on my medicine bundle. All the people that I know believe this. They think as I do. That's what I believe, that Black Mesa is holy. If it wasn't holy, there wouldn't be any sheep. That's how I think of it. And all things on earth are holy. That's how I know it to be. So why isn't Black Mesa holy?
In some measure, we are responsible for the overgrazing. When our government made peace with the Navajos in 1868, they were told to raise as many sheep and goats as possible. Later on, in the Dust Bowl year of 1933, the Bureau of Indian Affairs began to enforce stock reductions. This was done for almost 20 years without educating the people in livestock management. They remember the hunger then. So when drought comes now, they don't think of cutting down their herds. They blame the mining.
And this earth, the whole earth, they've taken over and are working on it. When I look for the hills, I see they are half dug away now. Some are dug around. They're doing everything possible to destroy the hills. And that's why it has not rained, and the earth is becoming barren. And also the water is being drained away, which causes the earth to dry up. What is going to happen?
We are presently operating in the original first cut, box cut at Black Mesa. And until we are 2 or 3 rows away from that, we can't start the grading and the reseeding. And after we do it, because of the seasonal aspects of the rainfall, we can't expect growth until we've had a rather complete year's cycle of rainfall.
Some reclamation has been done on Black Mesa. Peabody's record on other jobs has been good, partly because the company owns 75% of the land it's stripping across the country and can lease the farmland. The Indians want them to do the same quality of reclamation here on Navajo land. Red Walker of Peabody.
One of the problems up here now is it's so rocky and sand and hard. The present soil, there's not any topsoil here. It's mostly rock and sand. And when it does rain, you get such a runoff into these washes that you lose all your moisture. And we hope that with these areas that we mined and reworked, it's just like a farmer plowing a field. That's the reason he plows it, in order to get that moisture. The moisture will go down and it won't leave.
But what farmer plows down 80 feet? The problem is putting the soil back so that the water won't go down 80 feet, but stays near the surface where the plant roots can reach it. Peabody claims success with revegetation at 2 Colorado mines. But testing's impossible here. The sheep eat up the test plots.
The overgrazing problem was there before we were ever heard of. It is not our job to solve that problem. Well, obviously, some arrangement has to be made to protect the areas after we've reclaimed and seeded it until we get growth established. Just how it will be done, whether it will be done with fencing or whether it will be done with actual herdsmanship, I don't know. Because these arrangements are not arrangements that Peabody Coal Company can make. We have never yet gotten a commitment from Mr. McDonald as to how we're going to protect this reclaimed land.
Well, we mentioned this to Peabody Coal that it's not a question of only relocating the family in their house, but it's relocating the family, the house, and the livestock. In as much as all the other areas of the reservation, every square foot of it is being utilized. Now, where are these people going to move with their livestock until at such time that the land area is restored to some degree that it can be used again? Of course, you and I know that's going to take a long, long time. It's not going to be a matter of 4 or 5 years. I'm sure it's going to be longer than that.
My home. I worry about my home. That is why I'm often disagreeable. They are speaking of moving my hogan somewhere else when they begin mining here. We have no other place to move to. I worry about this.
Only one family has been moved so far, but there's already a problem. Sheep and cattle that once grazed in the mined area are now grazing on other people's land.
There is not a provision in the lease at the moment for compensation for livestock because it was assumed that the livestock would be moved to the new living quarters. If, in fact, this can't be done, I'm certain that Peabody would be willing to work out a compensating agreement with the tribal council to cover the livestock. But the matter has not been discussed specifically. We have not been asked to do it. And I didn't know that the tribe was going to be unable to provide grazing land for these families as they are moved.
An offer has been made, money for livestock. The Indian leaders may not even consider it. There is the old fear of stock reductions and a well-justified suspicion that this could be just another white man's lie. Meanwhile, the losers are the old people who have to live with the mining but get no immediate economic benefit from it. What does Tribal Chairman Peter McDonald want for the Navajos?
Strip mining really doesn't bother me because, first of all, any resources that is available in the ground that is on the reservation is for the Navajo tribe to utilize. And why couldn't the tribe build these power plants and sell the power to California and other places rather than just receive 1/10 of what the actual economic gain is from these resources?
I've heard our new chairman's words. He said, let the coal mining go on. It's all right with me. Why did he speak with such pleasing words, all sugar-coated when he was seeking office? He told us that he would come around whenever we asked for him, and that he would do everything we asked of him. What happened to all of these promises? Why does the mining go on? He's okaying it and thinks it's okay. If this mining was done at his home, in his backyard, would he like that? Would he think it's all right? He speaks such lies and talks against us. If he continues to speak like this, shouldn't we put him aside and put another one in who speaks for us?
So tribal politics are a part of the problem, too. Some Navajos feel that it is senseless and unfair that the tribe is selling water for the coal slurry pipeline when most of the people have none for irrigation and must haul water from government wells, often miles away. And because of scarcity, children grow up carrying pails of rainwater from potholes in the rocks. Where is Peabody's water coming from? Thomas Stetson consulted for Peabody.
that we reviewed the regional hydrology and geology and decided that the best possible development that would cause the least amount of interference with any other development in the area would be to put deep wells right on top of the mesa near the project itself. These are geologic cross-sections through Black Mesa. The formations from which the Peabody wells extract their water are the Entrada, the Navajo, the Kayenta, and the Wingate. In this portion of the geologic section, the actual production wells range from 3,600 to about 3,800 feet in depth. The Mesa Verde Formation is another water-bearing formation in which all of the local wells, or wells for local use, extract their water. In other words, they do not penetrate down to these deeper formations from which the Peabody Company extracts its water. And in constructing the Peabody wells, we had those wells cemented off for the top 2,000 feet so that the wells would not interfere with any of these upper formations.
Peabody's wells on Black Mesa will be drawing on groundwater supplies of surrounding areas at the rate of more than 800 million gallons each year for 35 years. And this is causing considerable worry.
One of the areas we're really concerned about is the availability of water in the future at Rough Rock and areas that might be using the water from the same water table in this area, and not knowing what the situation might be in the future. We've been asking the people from the Peabody Coal Company to give us an answer on this, and no letters have indicated to us that this is not the case.
I don't know what formation the Rough Rock well is in. It's probably at least 20 miles away. Perhaps after many, many years of pumping, there may be some effects over there, but there isn't enough hydrologic information available now to tell that.
There are many unanswered questions about the effect of mining on the area's future, but there's little mystery about what it's doing today. It's disrupting the very fabric of the old way of life on the Mesa. Although that way of life has been lonely and poor in material things, it has not been poor in spirit. Living in spiritual harmony with the desert, the Indians have somehow been able to turn their rocky and almost waterless homeland into a house of wonder, as the Navajo night chant says. The desert is a house made of dawn, a house made of evening light. When it rains, dark cloud is at the house's door. The zigzag lightning stands high upon it. Happily with abundant showers may I walk. Happily with abundant plants may I walk. This natural world is woven into every Navajo rug. The wool of the sheep, the natural dyes of the earth and the plants give their best spirit and colors to the pattern. Fear of losing this way of life is the main reason for the protests against Peabody, protests that included this play performed by the students of the Rough Rock School at the annual Gallup, New Mexico ceremonial. Much of the skit is a parody on the coal contract.
On May 18, 1964, the Navajo Nation signed a lease with the second largest coal operator in the United States to strip mine for 35 years in an area called Black Mesa, a vast coal ridge in the northeast section of Arizona near the Lukachukai Mountains.
Black Mesa, Lukachukai. The harmony of our Navajo world comes from the eternal and natural balance of the female mountain, Black Mountain, and the male mountain, Lukachukai. If these mountains, the sources of harmony and respect, are damaged, the way of the Navajo life may be destroyed.
As a representative of the Peabody Coal Company, I take this opportunity to make the following statement. We of the Peabody Coal Company agree to exercise diligence and respect in the process of prospecting and mining operations on Black Mesa. Furthermore, we are making a conscientious effort to restore land upon termination of the lease in as good condition as it was received, except, of course, for the ordinary wear and tear and inevitable depletion incident to all mining operations.
What about jobs? Why you hire us, the Navajos?
We fully intend to employ Navajo people when available and wherever feasible in all positions for which, in the judgment of the lessee, they are adequately qualified.
But our homes always lived on Black Mesa. My parents always lived on Black Mesa. What we do, where we go.
We will not be disturbing annually acreage occupied by more than one Navajo family. In fact, a good many of the dwellings and corrals are entirely outside the coal area and will never be affected during the entire operation. We will, of course, see to it that, when affected, the 78 families living on the leased area will be comfortably and promptly relocated.
You people talk about homes. You people talk about money. You people talk about this land. But do you really know these things? What do you know of this land? The soul of this land is alive as the trees and plants and the sheep we herd. You're killing the spiritual heart of this land. You're killing Mother Nature.
You do not seem to understand. We respect land, of course, but the need for power development is vital in this nation. With the 6 power plants and the 3 strip mines projected for this area, we will generate an ultimate capacity of 14,015,000 kilowatts of electricity for Arizona, a significant part of Southern California, and Southern Nevada, including Las Vegas.
Since when does Las Vegas need more neon? Since the mines came. The trees seem to have no life. Even the people have begun to change. The earth, it is dirty, it is black. The sun rises, it is gray. Since the mines came, we have to lock our hoe guns. Things are disappearing both inside and out. The mining trucks are killing our sheep.
Since the mines came, the earth's been wounded and scarred.
We are raising the standard of living and simultaneously providing for total reclamation of stripped lands.
Summer was so green till you came. Summer was so gay and fun. Now summer means working hard. Now summer means dying. So get out of here, factories.
This is how we feel.
How do you feel?
Around the middle of August, the skies open. The thunder rolls over the desert, and the Navajos know that their neighbors on the Hopi mesas have been dancing. Each year for the past 1,000 years, the Hopis have performed the snake dance, and each time the rain has come. It pours off Black Mesa, overflowing the washes and sometimes flooding entire valleys below. Hopi crops depend on this deluge. Now they say the life-giving water is polluted by the mining. Peabody's Red Walker denies this.
Right on down this road here, there's a series of 3 or 4 dams there that, and holding ponds there. Them was placed there by us to be sure that this coal didn't get away from us. Due to some kind of an accident, there has never been no coal slurry released from this mine or Black Mesa pipeline that went down any wash. I can take you to any wash up there and show you coal in it, but it's due to the fact that seams crop out in the washes themselves, and the coal erosion carries this coal down these washes. It's done it for thousands of years.
It is quite true that there is natural coal outcropping along the sides of the Moenkopi Wash drainage. I collected samples from the broken retaining ponds after the flash flood and compared them with samples which I have obtained from the Moenkopi village area. And they are quite different from the coal particles you find from natural weathering processes. What I see on Black Mesa as potential problems resulting from the strip mining from a geologist's point of view are twofold. The first is a matter of disintegration of the shale that is removed during the mining process. The shale, when wet, tends to disintegrate. It consists of a type of clay mineral, which hydrates pretty rapidly when wet, and tends to disintegrate, forming a thick mud. The second series of problems are essentially chemical in nature. The shale and the low-grade coal piled on the spoil banks contain sulfur. This weathers fairly quickly in our southwestern climate to produce sodium sulfates, which are the principal salts resulting from weathering of the shale and coal in Black Mesa. Now, if the material is allowed to get into the Moenkopi wash system, the principal drainage in the mining area, it poses a potential hazard for Navajo and Hopi farming communities some 40 miles downwash.
The cornfields at Moenkopi Village grow above a deep wash. If sediments from the coal fields on Black Mesa fill this wash and cause flooding across the entire plain, the salt buildup in the soil will make farming impossible. Hopi corn is a desert miracle. Grown on the side of a sand dune, it gathers just enough moisture during a season to produce short, stunted stalks and small ears. But this humble plant is both the staple food of the Hopi and an absolute necessity for any religious ceremony. The corn mother is a deity, like Mother Earth. Corn is also fertility. Corn is the body and the spirit when offered in prayer. So with cornmeal and prayer feathers, the Hopi asks for rain, successful crops, and a good and long life. Whether his prayers are answered depends on the goodwill of the Kachinas, who are messengers of the gods. The Kachinas arrive in December, in time to preside over the planting and growth of the crops, and finally go home to the nearby San Francisco Peaks in July, after the early corn is harvested. This is the time of the home dance, performed by rainbow Kachina dancers. It is a time of rejoicing, a time that corn stalks and gifts fill the center of the village square. The Hopi are giving thanks for the blessings sent from the gods. Shongopavi, one of the oldest villages, rests on the top of Second Mesa. This is Cyrus Joswaiktewa's home. Because he lives in the traditional way, he carries all his crops up to the mesa top on foot, and his water from the springs below. Firewood must be hauled from places miles away. His children go to two schools, the Kiva, a religious school where ceremonial knowledge is taught, and the government school, which teaches the everyday things that are considerably different from the Hopi religious instructions and prophecies. The Hopi prophecies teach respect for the natural world. Over the centuries, the Hopis who have followed these teachings have had many blessings. Corn has given them a dependable food supply. Their stone houses, high on the tablelands, overlooking all the approaches from the desert, have given them protection from Ute, Apache, and Navajo raiders. And the Hopis have survived. They still have disputes with the Navajos over grazing rights on Black Mesa. About 6,500 acres in the coal lease area are jointly owned by Hopis and Navajos. And because of this, Hopis also share in part of the coal royalties. But there's some question about the legality of the lease approved by the Hopi Tribal Council in 1966, and the right of the council itself to represent the people. Hopis are not one tribe, but 11 different villages. Cyrus and a great majority of the others have never voted, and they don't consider that they must answer to anyone except their own Kikmungi, or village headmen. These headmen have never signed any agreements with our government or Peabody Coal. So none of the Peabody money goes to them, nor would they accept it. Day by day, the split widens between the progressives of the new money culture and the traditionals of the corn culture. The tribe is being torn apart. Money just isn't part of the traditional Hopi culture. Even Haute Villa on Third Mesa, settled in the 1930s, doesn't have a money economy. The townspeople come from Old Aribi, which dates back to 1050 A.D., and they haven't changed much in 9 centuries. At harvest time, you'll still find women sifting dried beans, preparing to store their crops in the traditional way. instead of cash, the basis of the village economy is having a year's supply of dried corn as well as fresh fruits and vegetables from their terraced hillside gardens. The traditionals fear a change from this peaceful and satisfying way of life to a money-based economy which would destroy both their religion and their independence from white society.
The Hopi people and other Indian people, their life was good from the beginning. They followed the instructions from the Great Spirit, but somewhere they neglected to adhere to the teachings of the Great Spirit. And they had all kinds of trouble, like we're having right now at this very moment, because sometime in life we will meet the other people with a white complexion, and they would be very intelligent, and they would be very greedy, and they would have sweet tongue. They would tell lies to take our things away from us, like land and water and the forest and the things that really belong to the Hopi people.
Many of the white people who came have different religion or way of life, and they don't take time to understand us, and they are looking to material things, and now they're disturbing our sacred lands, like in Black Mesa, pollution all over, of land and water, rivers, and this four-corner area is very much concerned to the Hopi people because Peabody Coal Company and all other big business interests are coming in with all the things that they have used in other areas where they have brought pollution, air and water and everything.
At the present time, the Hopi tribe have very little income coming out from any other source. And with this development on the Black Mesa, the coal mine, will certainly would give us our income for the tribe.
Indians make up a very significant part of the population of the Southwest, and their lands are in trust on their behalf with the Secretary of the Interior as the trustee. Therefore, we must consider what impact economically, socially, culturally, such development of energy in the Southwest will have upon the Indians, benefit as well as hazard.
This is Utah Mining Company's Navajo mine. It brings more than $1 million in coal royalties to the tribe every year and employs 250 Navajos. After 10 years of operation, it has also eaten up more land than any other coal strip mine in the United States.
Coal has taken a major role over the past decade in the Southwest, which shows many coal beds near the surface, low sulfur. They are amenable to open pit at relatively low cost economically. They are in areas that need economic development in the sense that the Indian reservations can benefit economically. So there is a reason to pick coal in this part of the country. Now, in the Appalachian region, it would be higher cost, more difficult. The rocks are harder, and there are more problems that exist in the east than with the west. So that in the final process of what we would call reclamation, restoration, temporary use of that ground to produce the coal can be offset by the return of the material, the rubble, back into place and revegetation. So there are some good advantages in considering coal-fired plants in the Southwest.
At least 39 states in the East and Midwest have been severely damaged by strip mining. Kentucky alone has seen 395 miles of streams polluted by mine acids, its torn hillsides eroded by heavy rain. But due to the rains, something does grow back after 30 or 40 years. In the Southwest, the problems are a dry climate and soils ruined by salinity. Nothing is growing here on the spoiled banks of the Navajo mine.
When we talk about these pollution, air pollutions, I know for sure that any kind of pollution could be eliminated.
The plume of smoke from the Four Corners plant carries some 210 miles into Colorado. In 1971, the plant emitted 98,000 tons of particulates, 78,000 tons of sulfur dioxide, and 57,000 tons of nitrogen oxides. more pollution than in the cities of Los Angeles and New York combined.
What's it like to live in a home with electric heat? Is it different? Yes, electric heat is different. Very different. Silent as sunlight. Clean. Healthy.
Electricity may be clean in the house where it's used, but not where it's made. At the Four Corners plant, work is underway now to cut these emissions down. But even with the latest equipment, the amount of pollution is staggering.
Well, when we say that everybody's entitled and has the right to clean, fresh air, we must mean everybody. We shouldn't mean the elitist who likes to sit on the top of the mountain. We shouldn't mean the person who has a 75-mile view and likes to keep it. But the masses of our people who live in our cities and live in a room, the only way they can have the right to clean, fresh air is to have the means to attain it by pushing a button in their home to provide it. Now, we have great demands for power in the state of Arizona. The appetites for power of business, industry, the people, the schools, and so on are rather voracious, and we will need great amounts of power in the state to take care of them in the future. I think that is so much a better trade-off for our people than the inconveniences of some pollution that it provides.
We're trading off the scenic beauty and clean air of the great Southwest for electricity. It began at Four Corners 8 years ago. A planning group called West Associates, composed of 23 power companies, would create a huge grid system using the desert's water and coal to generate electricity for urban areas as far away as Los Angeles. Already operating are the Four Corners plant in New Mexico at 2,075 megawatts, and the Mojave plant in Nevada, 1,580 megawatts. 5 plants are in the planning stage or under construction. The San Juan plant in New Mexico, 1,700 megawatts. The Navajo plant in Arizona, 2,310 megawatts. In Utah, the Kaparowitz plant, 5,000 megawatts. The Huntington Canyon plant, 2,000 megawatts. And the Escalante plant, capacity unannounced. Eventually, all the projected plants will produce 3 times as much power as the Tennessee Valley Authority. All are burning coal from the region. Nearly all are taking their cooling water from the Colorado River and its tributary, the San Juan.
There's no question, in my view, that the circumstances are such that the already depleted and eroded away rights of the Indian people will be greatly eroded away, I think, myself, in years to come, and that there will be the total destruction of the Indian rights to use water.
For many years now, Apache and Navajo right to the San Juan and Colorado River water have been usurped by cities and irrigation projects. Now the power plants, with their exorbitant use of cooling water, are increasing the competition for an already short supply. The Bureau of Reclamation's Central Arizona project will bring some of this scarce water to Phoenix. Of course, subsidizing the growth of the city in this way creates a need for more electricity. The Navajo plant is being built not only to supply that electricity, but also to provide the pumping power to carry the water from the Colorado.
I would see absolutely no problem in supplying the needs of a doubled population in the state, either with energy or jobs or the other necessities of a fine civilization.
Whenever something has to be given up, it's the Indians who have to do it. The Navajos gave up their water rights to the Colorado River in return for the building of the Navajo plant, which will burn Black Mesa coal, transported here by special railroad. In this case, there's a conflict of interest on the government's part. The Department of the Interior is both the trustee of the Indian land and 24% owner in the power plant for the Central Arizona project. In 1966, conservationists successfully opposed the building of more dams on the Colorado River to pump that water into Central Arizona and accepted the Navajo coal-burning plant as an alternative.
Of course, now that we are involved in the construction of the Navajo plant, the same groups who opposed the construction of the dams on the Colorado River and urged the construction of the thermal plants are now appearing and, in fact, supporting lawsuits against the thermal plant, against the Navajo plant, for its construction.
The environmentalists appear to have made a mistake on this one. Bridge and Marble Canyon dams wouldn't have produced as much electricity as the Navajo plant, but then they wouldn't have created any air pollution either. Another example of strange planning. Glen Canyon, the last of the Colorado River dams, created Lake Powell, which last year hosted nearly 700,000 visitors. Now the Navajo plant will be spewing out pollution that corrodes boat hulls and drives visitors away. In a few years, the Kaparowitz plant will appear on the high plateau to the west and double the smog over the lake. The white chimney of the San Juan plant has also risen within sight of the mushroom cloud emitted by the Four Corners plant. The utilities admit concern about what this proximity will mean in spreading pollution throughout the area, but they say the plant will have the latest environmental controls.
I think the consuming public that has to pay for these environmental controls on all kinds of industry, including the electric industry and the automobile, are beginning to realize the cost and the impact on their lives. I think a lot of the governmental officials that have been gung-ho in terms of passing laws to solve all of the environmental problems of this nation are also beginning to realize that it costs substantial amounts of money to provide these kind of controls, and they ought to be carefully scrutinized before industry in general is required to spend this money, because it is the consumer that pays for it.
We were spending $23 million on cleaning up just units 1, 2, and 3. When these scrubbers are in operation, we will have what I think will be the cleanest stacks in America on coal-burning power plants.
The operators and partners of the 2 new units are in the process of deciding to spend an additional $30 million to put on a filter bag house on the new units, the 2 new units, which have a capacity of about 1.5 million kilowatts.
Scrubbers installed on the older units at Four Corners have changed this scene dramatically, but units 4 and 5 are still putting out 10,600 tons of fly ash a year. The bag houses were canceled. They don't work well enough.
We hear all sorts of claims about capability of fly ash removal. The most optimistic, genuine technical man does not really believe that more than 99.5 or 99.75 at the very best can be removed from a large generator of the type we're speaking of in Four Corners. But this is quite good. For example, the Navajo plant, when operating at some 2,100 megawatts with 3 units in full operation, 25,000 tons of coal per day, would be putting into the atmosphere only about 7.5 tons of particulate matter. Now, this is an incredibly small amount. When you think of the dust storms in the area, which put ever so much more particulate matter into the air than 7.5 tons in a big storm, or probably on a daily average.
Dust and fly ash are lung hazards, especially if they are combined with sulfur dioxide. And sulfur dioxide alone interferes with photosynthesis and the growth of plants. Leaves of the most sensitive plants, alfalfa and white pine, show streaks after only 8 hours exposure to very little of the pollutant. Although the levels in Arizona are not dangerous now, a doubling in the next 25 years could cause the kind of damage that has already killed crops and shriveled the trees around our large urban areas.
It is a fact, I think, that one could remove essentially 100% of SO2 in a laboratory system. He might be able to run a small pilot plant system for a few days and remove 80%. But if he were to attempt to run a 275 megawatt steam electric generator with all the trials and tribulations of keeping the plant in order, he would soon find that he could not even achieve 20% sulfur dioxide removal.
This is red rock country. When it rains, the sulfur dioxide turns into a mild sulfuric acid mist, which dissolves rock and speeds the erosion of the canyon lands. Smog from the Four Corners plant has already been detected in the Grand Canyon, Bryce, and Zion National Parks. With more plants in construction, possibly 9 more in Utah alone, the outlook is bleak for 27 national parks, monuments, and recreation areas in the Four Corners region. Tourism is one of the most important businesses in the 5-state area. The parks alone attracted some 12 million visitors last year. But what about the future? Getting rid of the pollution at the power plant stack is expensive and not very efficient. Some power engineers are looking for a way to capture the pollutants during the burning process.
These opportunities, as a matter of fact, were appreciated by power engineers even at the dawn of the age of electricity. In the 1880s, electricity was generated by gasifying coal.
To make gas out of coal, you cut down the amount of air that is supplied to the furnace so the coal doesn't burn all the way. You pass steam over the coal bed. This makes a fuel gas. You cool that gas and scrub the dust out of it with water to make a clean power fuel that burns at high temperatures to make electricity. Basically, the idea hasn't changed since the 1880s.
It's rather ironic to reflect upon the fact that this electricity was generated with 0 emissions of dust. Absolutely no emissions of dust, because the coal had first been gasified, turned into a clean gas, and then burned in gas engines. Indeed, a few French installations took out the sulfur too. They passed the clean gas over iron oxide, which removed the sulfur, and in those particular installations, electricity was generated in the 1900s with 0 emissions of dust and sulfur. A remarkable fact if we reflect upon the current picture with the power industry. Well, why didn't the power industry develop in this direction? The electricity industry grew so fast that by 1920, electric generating sets were roughly 20,000 kilowatts, 30,000 horsepower. Gas engines couldn't be built that big. And so that particular path of technological development died in favor of the steam turbine, with the coal simply being burned in a big box to raise steam, leading then, of course, to the emissions problem, because when the coal is burned, you get the fly ash and you get the sulfur oxides going up the stack.
The operators of the new Mojave plant have spent $600,000 on research and special equipment to raise its performance to 98.9% particulate control. And they have spent $1 million on sulfur control research. But they still cannot meet the air pollution standards of Clark County, Nevada. The alternative to the conventional power plant, gasifying coal to be burned as power gas on today's large scale, hasn't yet been perfected. One small grant to the City University of New York is keeping the project alive. According to Dr. Squires, the coal gasification plant would be considerably more efficient, and it would cost about $90 a kilowatt installed, compared to about $200 a kilowatt for conventional plants. To get higher efficiency and save fuel, there's still another way to go, and the technology is available now.
We have enjoyed 30 to 40 years of meeting our electrical energy demands by building bigger and bigger power plants. Never mind the reserves of our natural resources. Never mind how much fossil fuel we're burning. But that's not the case today. The reserves are running out. So often I've heard it said that we've done all we can. And I don't believe that for a minute. We haven't done all we can. There has been a great resistance to accepting the total energy concept. Turfland Mall, a 600,000 square foot shopping center located in Lexington, Kentucky, is one of the first projects in which Ohio Energy Systems became involved. Essentially, it is an energy plant to provide utility services to the tenants of the shopping center. Only 2 pipes serve this facility, one for water and one for gas. Natural gas is one of the cleanest fuels, and so our plant is virtually pollution-free. Besides, there is no thermal pollution because we don't discharge heat to a body of water like a conventional power plant does. By using the waste heat from the power generation process to provide heating and air conditioning, we can achieve 60 to 75% efficiency. This is to be contrasted against 30 to 35% efficiency for a conventional steam power plant. This means we use half the fuel to do the same job.
So why aren't total energy systems widely used? One reason is that it's a major threat to the local electric company. A shopping mall is a large electrical load, a plum that the franchise power company wants to keep. When a total energy system is offered to a new factory or hospital or computer center, the power company often fights it with lawsuits or big discounts to the prospective client. Many of the power companies say total energy systems are unreliable. But then their own record of reliability, with the increasing number of blackouts and brownouts in the cities, is questionable. Most hospitals and other places where continuous power is critical must have standby equipment for use when the electric company fails. According to Jim Weaver, the safeguards built into a total energy system are more reliable than plugging into the power lines. But government planners and engineers in the industry have not appeared anxious to accept the total energy concept. Virtually all the research and development efforts of the nation are now going into another alternative, nuclear power. This was underscored in September of 1971 when President Nixon visited the Hanford, Washington nuclear installation and announced the building of the first commercial breeder reactor.
I mentioned a moment ago how all of this business about breeder reactors, nuclear energy and stuff is over my head. That was one of my poorest subjects, science, and I got through it, but I had to work too hard. I gave it up when I was about a sophomore. But I can assure you that it's always been fascinating to me because it seems to me that if a people are to be a great people, we must always explore the unknown. We must never be afraid of it. That's why we have to go to space. That's why we should have built the SST. That is why, as far as this particular matter is concerned in the terms of nuclear power, we must not be afraid. We must explore it. We can't be sure what it's going to produce. But on the other hand, we know that by exploring the unknown, we're going to grow, we're going to progress, and progress in a way that will be good for all Americans and for other people in the world.
The reason why we must have fast breeders is that otherwise we will run out of any worthwhile sources of uranium within 25 years or less. U-235 will burn in a current reactor, burn meaning react, but it's only 0.7% of the uranium, so that something over 99% of the uranium gets thrown away in the current type of reactor because it isn't burnable. The fast breeder reactor is a proposed solution to this, and it's extremely ingenious in the physics and economics of using uranium, for what it does is this. In the fast breeder reactor, using a mixture of plutonium and uranium, you don't have the neutrons that are in the reactor slowed down as much, and hence many of those neutrons can get captured in uranium-238 and produce more plutonium. You end up making from uranium-238 at the end of, say, a year, a little more plutonium than you've used up. It represents something like 100-fold expansion of the utilization of the fuel. So we've got to have fast breeders if we're going to do nuclear at all.
Dr. John Goffman, a scientist with the Atomic Energy Commission, is a longtime critic of nuclear power plants.
We'd been assigned in 1963 by the Atomic Energy Commission to investigate in a comprehensive manner the impact of all peaceful atomic energy programs on man and the biosphere. And so we did just that job at the Livermore Laboratory. I headed that biomedical division, was an associate director of the laboratory. I have three fundamental objections and concerns about the fast breeder reactor that are even more serious than my objections to the current reactors. One is that the fast breeder reactor, with its compactness and high content of plutonium, is capable of being rearranged into what we call a critical mass, and therefore has the prospect of giving rise to an atomic explosion, which is not a possibility for the current version of nuclear reactors.
One can always conjure up postulated accidents, but one can conjure them up as readily for the light water reactors as for the breeder. It will be using plutonium as a fuel. Its coolant will be a liquid metal, as the term implies. The liquid metal is sodium, a tricky substance, in fact, a nasty substance to deal with, so that we will have to take considerable care with the coolant and as well as be meticulously careful with the handling of the plutonium.
Plutonium is the single most hazardous element known to man. 1/1,000,000th of a gram of plutonium is sufficient to produce lung cancer. A fast breeder economy based on plutonium means in 20 or 30 years we will be handling 100 tons of plutonium per year. 100 tons versus 1/1,000,000th of a gram. This means that any plutonium that we release to the outside of any container is there to be a potential lung cancer producer. For how long? With its half-life of 24,000 years, we can say that any plutonium released will be with man to give him trouble for periods like 100,000 to 500,000 years.
You are playing around with plutonium as your fuel, but by and large our safety program is designed to solve these problems before we actually have an operating reactor.
My third objection to the fast breeder reactor and plutonium is that we must never forget that plutonium in amounts of the order of 14 pounds is enough to make an atomic bomb. Everyone that thinks about the fast breeder economy is well aware that a black market in plutonium is extremely likely to develop for small powers and even for major illicit organizations and gangs.
The plutonium presently being produced in reactors is owned by the reactor operator. They are under stringent AEC regulations with regard to the use of that plutonium. They cannot sell it to a private person, for example, but they are the owners, and it would be anticipated in the period that the breeder comes in that they would continue to own the plutonium. Once again, we would have to regulate meticulously in order to assure that these materials are in the proper channels and that there are small losses, very small losses from the inventories.
Well, I believe this, that everything we do in our daily lives imposes some risk, and what we can hope for at most is to reduce those risks to as close to zero as possible. And I believe that the benefits of electrical energy from nuclear power probably save more lives than those that might possibly be lost. I would hope that everything we do in our society does provide greater benefits than risk.
I'm very surprised when I hear people say we must go the nuclear power route because it's the only source of enough fuel to meet our power requirements. Of course we have power requirements, and indeed we must meet our reasonable power requirements. But the situation is so bright with respect to several alternatives that I have no doubt at all that we can bypass nuclear fission entirely. Fusion power, which deserves a great deal more support than it is now getting. It is one of the very fine programs of the Atomic Energy Commission. It should be grossly increased in its funding, at least doubled, because if we can succeed in getting fusion power, it's vastly less hazardous than nuclear fission power, and it will give us almost infinite amounts available for the future.
The deuterium in seawater could provide us with 1 billion times the energy now left in all our coal and oil reserves. Simply, the difference between fission and fusion is that in fission you're splitting atoms of uranium or plutonium. In fusion, you're fusing 2 atoms of deuterium together. Only a small amount of radioactive byproducts are created in fusion. In some advanced models, there would be no radioactivity at all. The problem is that the particles of deuterium must be heated up to 180 million degrees for a full second. That's what happens in the sun and stars and a hydrogen bomb. These conditions pose a tough puzzle for researchers who must devise a magnetic field to bottle up the hot particles. But these particles can never form a critical mass and possibly explode, one of the hazards of nuclear fission. While technical problems are the major hurdles in developing a workable fusion system, the second big problem is money for research. National policy is committed to fission. The figures speak for themselves. 30 laboratories working on fusion have received about $30 million in research funds, compared to the big push for fission, $23 billion from government and private industry for research and development. We can also harness the power in the earth. From the Alaskan volcanoes down through the west, the heat stored in the earth is the equivalent of the energy obtained from burning 900 trillion tons of coal. At the geysers in Northern California, the Pacific Gas and Electric Company now generates 302,000 kilowatts of electricity. It's only a small part of the company's generating load, but production costs less than coal, its cheapest competitor. Geothermal steam has been used to heat homes or make power in Italy, Iceland, New Zealand, Japan, Mexico, and the Soviet Union since the early part of the century. The United States has been slow to realize its potential. The geysers plants, constructed since 1960, are producing our first and only geothermal power. There are pollution problems. Hydrogen sulfide, boron, and other elements from deep within the earth. The corrosive gas damages both the steam pipes and the trees in the surrounding area. This could and must be controlled. The potential geothermal power under the Imperial Valley of California and the Cerro Prieto, Mexico, could provide at least 30% and possibly 90% of the entire country's electrical production. In the development of these fields, Mexico is the pioneer. Experience here and around the world indicates that far more hot salt water than steam will be found in geothermal exploration. One pollution question is, what should you do with the salt water, the brines that come out of the earth? Do you re-inject the water in deep wells, or desalinate the water and reclaim it for desert use? There's some evidence that underground water must be replaced to prevent the land from subsiding. The ultimate source of clean energy is the sun. A few years ago, the National Academy of Sciences made a study of the overall energy picture in the nation and dismissed solar energy as being of no value on the basis that it was too expensive. 1,000 times more expensive than burning coal. But they were only considering the cost of solar cells used on spacecraft. Since then, many plans have been proposed to convert light, heat, or wind, a byproduct of the sun's heat, into electricity. One of the most practical is the solar energy farm invented by Doctors Aidan and Marjorie Meinel of Tucson, Arizona. Their plant would collect the heat of the desert sun and convert it into electricity using a standard steam turbine, just as we are doing now with coal or nuclear energy.
Our proposal for a new approach to the use of solar energy is actually getting quite a bit of attention now from people in Washington as a viable alternative for other types of power. At the present time, there is very little money for development of these units, but the interest is growing. This is a model of a solar power farm. What we do is coat the sheets of stainless steel with a coating, optical thin film coating, that absorbs sunlight. The energy is collected in these banks of collectors that are represented by these black strips. These get quite hot, and the liquid sodium then cools these, flows back along these pipelines, back here to a thing called thermal storage. The solar energy has one very basic limitation, that you want it to operate when the sun isn't shining. So you have to store the energy. And in our proposal, we store the energy for night and cloudy day operations by dumping excess heat during the day into a big pool of molten salt.
The solar farm is designed to store enough energy for one night and 2 cloudy days. The Meinels call this a farm because they're farming solar energy directly instead of converting it into crops for livestock or people. This is a model of a 1 square mile power plant, equivalent to a 250 megawatt generating station. A 1,000 megawatt plant would take up 4 square miles with the collectors raised above the ground so that cattle could still graze underneath. They feel that the first 1,000 megawatt size plant could be operating by 1980. All the technology is available.
The utilities people called us one day and said that they had figured out that the amount of land that they have leased for strip mining of coal in the Four Corners area, if that amount of land had been put to solar energy, would have produced exactly the same amount of electricity. The only difference being that the solar energy would have gone on and on year after year, as long as the sun shines. But the coal is going to be depleted in 35 years. So the same amount of land that will produce power for 35 years could have been used to produce the same amount of power as long as we have the sun.
The utilities in the Southwest are shopping around today for other ways to produce power. But the fact is that they have committed us to coal-burning power plants until far beyond the year 2000. It's probably too late to stop the destruction of Black Mesa. This desert has been in a drought cycle for years, and reclamation may not work. Gone will be the hummingbirds. Gone will be the grazing lands and the livestock. Gone will be a way of life and a culture on Black Mesa that the United States government had promised to protect. By taking the water and stripping away the earth, we are once more displaying the white man's peculiar genius for conquering nature. There is much we can learn from the Navajo and the Hopi if we will only listen and open our eyes. They have survived in this desert for many hundreds of years. How long will our cities survive? Until the supply of water and coal and clean air runs out? Then what will happen to Phoenix, Tucson, and Albuquerque? Where will Los Angeles get its power? The tragedy is that there are many alternatives to a course that may end in our own destruction. It's not necessary to exploit every resource completely as it becomes available through our technology. All the coal today, all the uranium tomorrow. We could have our choice of these and other, almost unlimited power resources. The alternatives that we have explored are but a few. A handful of scientists working with some dreams and very little money have come up with ways of burning coal with minimal air pollution, making machines more efficient so that we need less fuel, tapping the heat of the earth and the energy of the sun, ways of producing electricity that will not destroy the land. And beyond that, there are personal choices that we as individuals must make, knowing that the earth cannot sustain our demands for unlimited growth. As individuals, we can use less energy and still maintain our standard of living. As a nation, we can develop the alternative systems that would provide power without destroying resources or poisoning the land. If we don't, the Hopi prophecies may very well come true.
But the white people are bringing all this technical knowledge, inventions of all kinds, and with all the knowledge they have today, scientific knowledge, they should stop and not bring that in, but turn back and clean this area first. Then we will know that he is doing things in the right manner. Otherwise, we will destroy this land again like it's happened in another world. This is what the Hopi do not want to see. And we are asking, we're searching, we're trying to bring this knowledge to all people everywhere so that everyone could have a chance to help to protect this area. Otherwise, we will go back into darkness.